Alexandra, hi, hello, welcome to the Female Startup Club podcast.
Hi, Doone. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be talking to you today. We have a lot to cover, lots of exciting stuff in the works. I always love to just start by getting you to actually introduce yourself in your own words and tell us what Dame is.
I'm Alexandra Fine. I am, I think, a pretty weird person. I have a company called Dame Products. We make tools for sexual pleasure. So that looks like toys for sex. That looks like lubricants, body positioning pillows, content, courses. Those are all the ways that we are trying to help close the pleasure gap, help people honor their sexual pleasure. And yeah, that's me.
And yeah, that's you. I mean, well, we love weird people on the show. I would say I'm probably kind of weird too. I'm down. I'm into that. Let's go back. Let's rewind. I know that you started somewhere in the vicinity of 2014 at the kitchen table, probably with humble beginnings. I think I read you had some silver coins in the mix somewhere. Can you take us back to that time? What got you thinking about starting this business? Where does your entrepreneurial story begin?
My dad worked for the family business and my grandfather started. So I think that it was in my blood. No, but like that I was exposed to it. I knew what it looked like to work for yourself. I knew that you did not have to be brilliant to run a business. So that was definitely something that was interesting to me. I knew that that was definitely can be a powerful way of just being in control, of getting to be more of your full-ish self, whatever that means in the workplace. I knew that you could realize a lot of wealth that way too, that if you run a successful business, you can either sell that business or it can, generate a decent cash flow for you. So I think just witnessing the family business was made me want to be entrepreneurial. But then my passion was really for passion. Like I was really just fascinated by both like this experience of sexuality, pleasure, being a woman, and that intersectionality of those things of like, my first kiss feeling like the guy was high fived and like I was like shamed. But we did the same thing together. I don't understand why we're getting different responses. So I think that really sparked something in me. It just felt like so much burden of sexual pleasure, of strong intimacy. I ended up getting my master's in clinical psychology at Columbia, but realized like I'm pretty impatient and that I didn't think going and getting my PhD for another like 6 years was really what was going to feel fulfilling to me. Wasn't fulfilling me with passion. So I ended up working in consumer goods after getting my master's in clinical psych. I loved it. It just wasn't theoretical. It was pretty tactile. It was like nice to like do something and see the results pretty quickly. And then I was like, okay, how can I combine my passion for pleasure and intimacy and talking about this topic that impacts us so much that we can't seem to figure out how to talk about with owning a business. And it was just so apparent, like once that clicked for me that like, oh, toys for sex, sexual pleasure products, there's a whole industry that I don't feel like is innovating in their product category. And I don't feel like they're marketing to me in a way that resonates with my experience with these products. So that just felt like, great. That's an opportunity right there. That was kind of where the idea started. I had a first product idea that was Eva, the hands-free vibrator that you can wear while you're having penetrative sex. So most people with vulvas need clitoral stimulation in order to have an orgasm. So this provides that. And we partnered with an MIT engineer who helped me iterate on that concept. We launched it on Indiegogo and raised $575,000 in 45 days. So it was a really tremendous way of starting a business.
I feel like we need to pause there. I feel like we've got to cover a few quick things pre getting to the crowdfunding campaign. First of all, I mean, how did you come up with like a prototype to even begin with? And then what was leading you towards the crowdfunding? Like, how come you weren't like, let's go get VC dollars, or like, let's put our own money into it? What was the journey there?
We did put our own money into it. There was like a year of work before we got the crowdfunding, to your point. And I think if you have a product idea, there's a good chance you could start making it in your home in some way. And that's like what I did. So I did get my art minor, which ended up being I have a minor in fine arts. It was very helpful in this endeavor in starting a business. The first thing I did was I took a $50 coin, I wrapped it in some cellophane, and I put it in between my outer labia, and it stayed in place. And I was like, oh wow, like this part of your body can hold something. So that was like arguably my first prototype. And then from there, I got moldable plastic and I molded it around a pancake motor, which is a vibrating motor type. And I started making vibrators and trying those out by taking apart other vibrators and using moldable plastic. I was able to make it stay in place. I started having friends come over to try it out. All of this is easier if you're not making a sex toy too, because it's easier to get your friends to come over and try out whatever else it is that you're designing or creating. But my friends are pretty awesome about it. And I learned really quickly that, it needed a movable part in order to adjust to not only different body types, but also as we open and close our legs and move our bodies. So I started, iterating there. I joined a maker space and started to learn how to 3D print. And I started going to like founders meetups where I eventually got put in touch with this MIT engineer named Janet Lieberman, who was able to do everything I was doing much better. So she took like this like 3D printed product that I was starting to make, and she went home, she tried it. She was like, oh, I can make this. Like, I totally understand what you're going for here. This is really informative. And then she was able to design a 3D model really quickly or much faster and start testing that with real people. And when we got it to a place that we felt really comfortable with and started finding a supply chain, that's when we went to Indiegogo. So I had purchased like a 3D printer. I already wasn't working a full-time job. These are important.
Yeah, these are important moments.
Moments. Yeah, I was working on the product by myself, and then I got let go from the startup I was working on. And I think that was like, it was so awful. I was 25, 26. Was like a straight A student. I had never thought I would get fired. That was not something I had ever considered. And so it was really tough for me. It ended up being amazing, right? Like
it was the silver lining.
It was such a silver lining. I feel like that happens often in life. Moments that feel like problems are often really opportunities. And that was really the case for me. Like, I was already working on Dame and the first product, Eva. And then I was kind of applying to jobs, but I just started working on it more and more and more. I was living in my grandma's pool house, which was a huge privilege. So I didn't have to worry about rent. Then I met my co-founder and I had some savings and she had a little bit of savings. So we put it in and we bought a 3D printer and started working with a marketing agency to help us put together the crowdfunding campaign. And then we launched. And I know you also asked why crowdfunding. I mean, like, I think that if you have a physical product offering, crowdfunding can be a really powerful way of getting your first capital. Your first injection of capital is likely to be could be your most expensive, or it probably will be your most expensive capital. I think it really depends on what kind of company you're trying to start. But for me, I was there was just no way 26-year-old Al was with her bag of prototype vibrators was convincing a VC to invest in them.
Also in 2014, or I think it was 2016 when you did the campaign.
It was 2014 when we launched the campaign, 2015 when we started shipping. So it was even like 2013 when I started having the idea. And I remember I applied to an accelerator where somebody asked me if it was a joke. They asked me if the company concept was like a joke.
Male or female? Who asked you?
I don't know, but like, we know. We know. We know. So it was like an accelerator where the judges, like, they gave you written feedback, and that was supposed to be like, hey, look, at the very least, you're going to get written feedback from some experienced entrepreneurs. And, I got one that was really helpful and took it seriously. And one that literally, that was the whole thing they wrote, was like, is this a joke? But then there were other moments where, like, I went to go get a patent, and because the way the product works is really unique and I wanted to protect it. And I got into a entrepreneurial program with Fish and Richardson where they did not charge me for the legal work until like later on in the business. And there were 2 female lawyers, and they totally got the concept, and they were like, yeah, we'd love to do this work for you. So that was like a moment of real validation in the direction I was going. So I really, like, I look back and I'm like, wow, had I not gotten that validation and maybe only gotten some of this negative feedback early on, like, I wonder if I would have kept on going. Really important to also like create your own validation and not to lie to yourself, but like create a survey, go on Google survey, I think is what it's called, where you can like pay some people to like, are you interested in this? Like, does this product or offering seem like something you would use? Or go interview people in the niche that you're in or whatever it is, because it's important to have conviction in what you're doing.
100%. And I mean, for you had, obviously you have that moment with those 2 female lawyers who gave you conviction in what you were doing, gave you the confidence boost, but then you obviously go through this crowdfunding campaign, you raise $500,000. I think your goal was something like 50,000 or 38,000 or something a lot smaller. You sell 10,000 units, it takes off. Do you think that was because of the planning and the marketing agency doing something extra special than usual, or do you think it was just truly right place, right time, it hit the right people and it just spread?
Yeah, I think a little bit of both, but mostly the latter. I think that when you find product market fit and people really want it, that's really important. And but it's kind of twofold because it was also timing. So one, I think that Eva as a product concept is a product that a lot of people desire and want. So if you have something like that, if you have a great product, or not just a great, but also a unique product, then crowdfunding, press, those things will kind of come to you. I think we did do a great job of articulating the problem. There's a pleasure gap. Women are 4 times more likely than men to say sex is not at all pleasurable. People with vulvas need more clitoral stimulation. Here's a product that gives you more clitoral stimulation in a way that's going to likely work with your current sexual practices. So that really resonated. I also think we did a great job in the video of explaining, like, this is how far along we are on the prototype, like convincing people that we could actually make the product. I do also think it was like culturally decent timing. We really were the first female team to come together to make a product, to make a vibrator. And like, just nobody's even done that before, really, which is wild.
That is so wild.
Yeah. It's a little hyperbolic. Like, Babeland existed. Babeland is a sex toy shop, and that was started by women. And I imagine that at some point they probably white labeled and made some products, but really they were a store first. We really were innovating on the product category. That was timing, that was just like us existing and like feeling the pull of the universe into the space that the universe was ready for. But then on the flip side, it feels like the universe wasn't ready for it, because it's been a really eye-opening experience to watch the world change around this conversation. Like 2014 versus now, talking about women's pleasure and talking about sexual pleasure as part of the public discourse has that's just completely shifted. So that's been really cool to be a part of that wave.
Yeah, pioneering that change and being, the voice for women everywhere. I love it. I want to switch a little bit to marketing, because I know that you have obviously had a lot of challenges in this space. It's typically one of those categories that falls under the umbrella of taboo, which, is wild. But I feel like you've probably got some real gems in how you got the word out in the beginning, how you were spreading the message. Obviously, you had the Kickstarter campaign, but following that, those next few years. And I want to talk about it because I read an article you were saying somewhere online that you were accustomed to coming up with creative solutions when capital wasn't readily available to you. And I want to understand, what are some of those creative solutions you were doing over the years?
Yeah, I think just like if you make great products, like that's really important. Say something powerful. Say something like, if in your marketing you can really have a conversation that prickles people's ears, that gets people interested in wanting to have a conversation back with you, I think that's really important. I think it's important in the same vein there, things that are going to get press's attention, which is that's twofold. But if you can get press attention, you don't need to, that's earned media. Earned media is so powerful. There's free ways of getting people to talk about your brand by, like for us, like our challenges, we just tried to turn that into our opportunities again. The MTA campaign, or when Facebook shut down our ads, we try and get journalists to talk about our initiatives there and the challenges we're having, because then we're getting the advertising. And I think in both of those instances, they really spark a fascinating conversation around why is this a taboo? How the taboo gets created in the first place. I think it took me a second. I don't love complaining, and sometimes those things felt like I was complaining, but they are my real experiences with platforms preventing me from growing my business. And they also are preventing my business from realizing its mission of honoring sexual pleasure and helping consumers and people honor their sexual pleasure as a key part of their well-being. But if we're not allowed to hold space for those conversations, then like what we're implicitly telling people is that their sexual pleasure isn't important, and that all of these other things are, like, for example, on the MTA, like where we couldn't run ads, like, there were ads for breast augmentation. That's apparently important. There's ads for erectile dysfunction medication, they're both important. I'm not trying, everything is important and valid. And it's a real need that consumers have, but so are sex toys. And we should be allowed to advertise as long as we're not making people feel aroused on the subway. I see no reason why we can't advertise. And in fact, I think my whole mission at Dame is also to help people understand having public conversations around sex. So this way we can have clearer boundaries around what is okay and what is not okay. I think that what we're doing is helping stop people masturbating on the subway, not encouraging it. I've experienced that here in New York, and it's awful. It's an awful experience. Very uncomfortable, and I think, I'm getting off topic here.
Let's bring it back to the MTA, because I'm really interested in this, and you've just announced this crazy news, crazy win for you guys. But basically, to backtrack for anyone who is listening in and doesn't know what the MTA is, which was me before, I looked it up. MTA is the New York Metropolitan Transport Authority, I think it stands for, and basically,
Yeah, it's our subway.
it's the subway. And you as a company sued them this year, or was it last year, or some year? You sued them at some point.
2 years ago.
Oh, Jesus, 2 years ago. Okay, so you sued them. Can you explain like the context of that process? Like, how much does it cost to sue the MTA, by the way? Are you allowed to talk about how much the legal fees for this were?
I think I am. I'm never like, there's definitely things I'm not supposed to talk about, but like, I'm really bad at not talking about things. I really feel like, just like in sex, like honest, open conversations about money are so important. Yeah, we went to go run ads. They said we could run ads, and they decided that we couldn't, saying that no sexually oriented business could run ads. But clearly, there were lots of other sexually oriented businesses that were running ads. So, getting clearer on what that meant, it really impacted the business. Like, we had planned for it, and I tried to get some press around it. We got some press, but ultimately, I decided like a lawsuit would be in our best interest, in that it would hopefully make real change. It would hopefully allow us to advertise, and that it would help push forward an important conversation that would hopefully get us earned media. So like, it seemed in alignment. I found a lawyer, and I think the whole lawsuit, I want to say, cost like $300,000, which is a lot of money. I can't tell you about the settlement, but I can tell you that like, for me, the experience was worth it in like brand equity. I think it was one of the most powerful marketing campaigns. It's a really sticky story. And it's weird because like, you don't know, very few people start a company to sue people, right? Like, does that feel like it's going to push us forward in the direction of whatever we're trying to grow at Dame? Took me a while to like sit with that thought before I was like, no, I'm going to spend money, some of which are like investors' dollars. And investors were kind of like, you're going to do what? You want to get into a lawsuit? That sounds like a distraction. That sounds like it's going to be a big money suck. But I think like acknowledging the ways that it could impact us negatively helped us just plan for that. I just made sure that I wasn't giving a lot of time to the lawsuit and only was involved in things that were really important. Tried to, bring it into the narrative of what we do at Dame often. And yeah, I think it was a solid decision.
That's just so wild and so amazing. Obviously, congratulations. Go you. What a triumph in the business, but also in the landscape, because of course this, opens the way for so much to come. Have the ads gone up on the MTA?
Yeah, if you're in New York City subway, there's a 10% chance you will see our advertisements. I mean, I do think it's a huge step in the right direction. Technically, we ended up settling, but a lot of the press coverage just says we won, which I think is really fascinating because, it's tough. Like, I don't think I got everything I wanted, or I know I didn't, but my intention was to run advertisements. And I think that getting to run any ads on the subway system is a step in the right direction, that it does help change the landscape, change the conversation. So that's really exciting. And I really hope that I get to work with the MTA again and continue to like shift that landscape in our understanding and make people feel comfortable so that they can have empowered sexual experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so exciting. And do you think like you'll pursue that kind of approach when it comes to other platforms like that are, holding you back from the advertising that you want? Or has that already started to shift anyway when it comes to like the Facebook Metas of the world?
The subway system is a government entity, so it has to abide by certain rules that private organizations don't necessarily have to. So it gets pretty challenging there. It's definitely something I've considered and thought about. I do feel like, especially with Facebook and such a big company, like, I'm not the only one that's impacted. I speak to companies that sell menstruation products, menopause products. They all have issues around this idea that their products are inappropriate for the world, when really, like, we're just trying to bring value to life experiences that are real life experiences for a lot of people. And it's so infuriating just to see the ways in which these businesses and organizations are stifled, because at the end of the day, I think it really does stop, again, mostly women, mostly people with vulvas, from having a higher quality of life because they can try a healthier tampon, or learn more about menopause, or, buy a safe vibrator that feels really good and helps them have, more pleasure in their life. Like, yeah, I think I think it's been frustrating.
It's mind-blowing. It really is mind-blowing. I'm sure there's not a woman out there that can't agree with that. That's just crazy. It's crazy. It's obviously a challenge that you'll have to, I guess, battle with constantly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is. And I want to say it does feel wild, but there's also, like, I am trying to shift our cultural conversation around something we don't like to have a conversation about. And so it's both wild. It's why the business exists. And there are, like, legitimate concerns around what, like, we should and shouldn't be advertising. Like, I think I wouldn't want to see advertisements in the world that are arousing in public or inherently erotic. So, like, which, by the way, I think we do all the time for, like, clothing companies and, like, other brands. Like, we use sex to sell other things. So I do think it's a really important conversation and a challenging one. But I do feel that vibrators aren't inherently arousing or acknowledging them. So, yeah. And people always ask me about, like, what about the kids? If the kids see it, I think the kids, like, can definitely know.
Kids need to see it.
They need to see it. Yeah.
They need to see it earlier. They need to see it much earlier. They need proper sex ed.
They need proper sex ed. They do. And I think, like, usually I like to ask people, well, what is it that you're feeling? Because I think really what people are saying is, like, I actually don't have the language to have these conversations. And it makes me uncomfortable to think about having to explain it. So I'm like, well, that's exactly why you need us. Like, let me help you have those conversations. Let's talk about it.
And hopefully for younger generations, it is really different. Hopefully for younger generations, they have different kinds of sex ed. They have more companies supporting them, more brands supporting them, more open conversations around it. 100%. 100%. What do you think is important advice for entrepreneurs coming into 2022?
I think that the advice I am going to give is probably just universal to any time, which is, like, it's really important to be aligned, like, like, within yourself. Like, what is it that you want? Why do you want to start a business? Get really clear about that for yourself, and then own that. At the end of the day, you have to, like, live with all of the decisions that you make. It's really running a business is tough. I think it's a lot of emotional labor. You have to make decisions where there isn't, like, a right answer. There's a your answer. And it's important to just sit with those questions and decide what you want to do based on, like, what feels good to you. Like, that's a big thing that I've learned from sex education and sexual pleasure. Like, things that feel good are good for you. Well, I would cut that. I don't know. That's not entirely true, but it's important to know what feels good in our bodies and why, and to explore that and to do things, I think, that feel good. So, like, trying to think of a more concrete example. Like, if you're going to let somebody go, like, how much severance should you give them? Like, if you want to raise capital, why do you want to raise capital? How much money? What's your end goal here? I just think it's important to, like, know what you really want and to take a breath every now and then and to just know your own intention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Thank you for that. We ask a series of 6 quick questions at the end of every episode, some of which we might have covered, some of which we might not have, but I ask them all the same. Question number 1 is, what's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing?
I do what I do because I believe sexual pleasure is important, and I want people to know it and to rethink about it and to have more pleasure.
100%. We all need it. Question number 2, what's been the number 1 marketing moment that made the business pop?
I think it's when we sued the New York City subway system.
It's a pretty big one.
That was a pretty big one. We were also on Megyn Kelly Today Show. That was a big moment for us. And the first Indiegogo campaign was a large moment for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Question number 3 is, where do you hang out to get smarter? What are you reading to or listening to or subscribing to that would be good for other founders to take note of?
Sorry, I'm like spinning. Like there's just so many. Like I have like an executive coach, and that's so helpful. And like I like reading Professor G. Scott Galloway stuff around marketing. He's really informative and interesting. I do love reading too. So like right now I'm reading the Netflix book, the No Rules Rules. And then I also do find that like another book I read that I did think was really helpful too was like The Way of Integrity. That was what it's called, by Martha Beck. So I really also like things that help me just sit and get in tune with like who I am and what I want. So Martha Beck is really cool for that.
I'm going to link them all in the show notes for anyone who wants to check those out. Thank you. Question number 4 is, how do you win the day? What are your AM or PM rituals and habits that keep you feeling happy and successful and motivated?
Honestly, okay, I'm a really big fan of 5-minute journal, but now I often just like yell them out loud at my husband, like just the 3 things I'm grateful for. Like what would make today a great day? I love that question. Thinking about that in the morning, spending some time with some quality time with my daughter is really nice. And usually that happens in the morning. And then like a joint at night is, really helpful for me.
Winds down the day.
Yeah. Winds down the day. Sometimes I think it's even just the breathing exercise of just like sitting outside, and I think I'm doing something, so that makes it okay to slow down. And then really it just slow down. And it's so nice. And I have so many good ideas, or I think they're good ideas. When I smoke, or if I go for a walk, or if I just do something that really helps me slow down, I realize like I can think better. Because I can be go, 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 go a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Question number 5 is, if you were given $1,000 of no strings attached grant money, where would you spend that in the business? And it's to highlight, I know it's not a lot of money, it's to highlight where the most important spend of a dollar is for you.
It's tough because every channel, depending on what we're doing in each channel, can be different. So, and I think, getting hung up on the $1,000, like affiliate marketing has been really powerful for us. So I think $1,000 into press in some way. I think it would be like towards somebody that can help me. Yeah, I would do press, which is, I think, interesting because I think a lot of times PR agencies can feel like hard to see the return on. So that's been really, that's where I'd put it.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And last question number 6 is, how do you deal with failure? What's your mindset and approach when things don't go to plan and fall to pieces?
I think taking a second to realize what did work is really helpful, and honoring that. Because I also think that as a leader, sometimes things can seem really successful, but it doesn't meet your expectation. And like, but your team still worked really hard, and there was a lot of things that were really successful. So making sure that like I take the time to see that and acknowledge it also not only is good for the team, but then I realize that it helps me too. just I think taking a second to see what was successful about it. There's always a learning.
Mm-hmm. Always a learning. So true.
Always a learning. And it's okay to fail, like failure's good. So like honoring that I think is important.
I'm with you. I'm so with you. This was so fun.
It's still hard sometimes,
It is hard sometimes. It is. Sometimes you're like, I don't want to get out of bed today.
Yeah. I also want to say $1,000 maybe to UX, like sometimes like a little change in your conversion rate on your website can make a huge difference in everything else you're doing. So bottom of the funnel, really good too.
Love that. Haven't had that on the show as one of the answers, so grateful for it. This was so fun. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing bits and pieces of your story and what you're doing in the world. You're just a superstar. I love it.
Thank you.